Hey everybody, how's it going? Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be doing an interesting presentation on the most valuable mule coins. Now, for those of you who don't know what a mule coin is, it's when there are two different designs featured on the same coin that are not supposed to be there. So, for example, if a Washington quarter was on one side and a Sacagawea dollar was on the other side, that would be pretty crazy, and that would be an example of a mule coin. So I've picked some of the wildest ones, and we're going to go through them in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to talk it over, explain them, and explain what type of values are associated. But with that being said, let's get into the video, talk about some of the mule coins. So our first coin of the day that we'll be going over, and we're starting going up in denomination and up in order, is the 1959D Lincoln Wheat Penny. And this could be one of the most controversial coins that we'll be discussing today, because there's a lot of debate as to whether this coin is real or not. But basically the story is that a retired police officer bought the coin for about $1,500 in 1986 and came out with it. He said that he'd be forwarding it to the Department of the Treasury, and they ended up certifying that it's their opinion that it's genuine. No grading companies ever certify the coin. So he sent it in many times to PCGS, NGC, those sorts of companies. And there was some debate as to whether it was definitely fake or if it was just something that the grading companies weren't comfortable with. There's something called the spark erosion process, which I'm not that familiar with, but some people thought that this coin had been subject to that process. But the bottom line is that there's still people who are willing to pay a fair amount for it. The coin was sold in 2003 for $48,000, and in 2010 that number decreased to $31,000. But in a recent auction, I think it was earlier this year or last year, it sold for $50,000. So I bet that number would creep higher if people could authenticate it, if it was definitely a real coin, like some of the other coins we'll be seeing where there's more telltale signs that the coins are real. But this conforms to the idea of being a mule. Definitely would have had to be struck at different points in time. The next coin that we're going to be covering is a little bit more real and veritable based on a lot of the characteristics that I'll go over. But this one was made out of a dime die on the reverse. And the thing is with these, the penny and the dime, this was on the penny, so the dime is about 5% smaller than the penny. So when imprinted, you'll see a really bold reverse, and you get that here. And then on this side, the metal has kind of flown up once the reverse of the coin is struck. So when the obverse is struck, then you get less on the front. You can see at the edges, the metal is kind of worn away. It's not quite there because it's been punched by that reverse. So this one was authenticated by PCGS as a Mint State 65 coin and sold for $51,750 in 2010. It's a little ugly on the In God We Trust, does not look great, but the coin is an interesting one, and there are some similar to it. First, we'll go to the 1999 Roosevelt, and this one sold for a fair amount more. I'll get to it in a second, but the coin is just better in appearance, it's thought to be. It still retains that edge where it's worn out. You can see the L didn't even make it, but a lot of the top of In God We Trust, then you have a very sharp strike on the reverse. This coin was discovered in Erie, Pennsylvania, out of a roll of pennies from the bank. So all these people saying check your change, it's pretty rare that things happen, but obviously this coin was found and was sold to a local jewelry store before they got an offer that they said they could not refuse. A big buyer bought it, and it ended up getting purchased in auction in 2006 for $138,000. This is a PCGS MS66 red coin, and this was the highest paid for a double denomination error at the time. But the seller, it's kind of sad, purchased it for his father, but before he could get it, his father passed away. But it does, at the time, it was with the other double denomination dimes, so the 93 and then one of the next coins that I'll talk about, it was with those. So it was cool to kind of have that set complete. And this nickel is an interesting one because it's one that at first glance does not seem to necessarily have an error, because they both look like old nickel reverses. But the thing that people do not remember about this coin is that the times were in World War II, they transitioned away from the traditional metal compositions in favor of new ones. So one of those that they tried out was where they shifted, and it was a 35% silver nickel, and those were made in 1942 at the San Francisco and Philadelphia mints. And when they did that, they would put a large mint mark above Monticello, where I'm circling with my mouse right now. But unfortunately, or I'd say fortunately, this coin was struck, and it uses the reverse of a large-ass 1941 back, where they paired it with a 1942 from San Francisco. So it really should only have San Francisco copies with the S up here. 1942 had some with the small mint mark at Denver, but those were not silver. So this one was found. It's pretty circulated, though it's another one where there's a lot of people who think it might not necessarily be real, but nobody's ever been able to disprove it. So there's more confidence in this one relative to the 1959D wheat penny that we talked about earlier. It sold for $11,000 about 45 years ago. So it's a fair amount of money because the prices have really increased since then, and it would probably be far more valuable today. Next up, we have kind of the inverse of what we were talking about before, and it also conforms to the characteristics that you would expect, but that is a 1995 penny on a Roosevelt dime. So on this side, since the penny is now about 5% bigger than the dime, when it's struck, you see the L is kind of falling off the rim, as is the upper part of the In God We Trust, and things are just really tight, whereas the dime then has a little bit of weakness around these edges, but it's not as significant because the penny does not actually leave as much of an imprint like the dime, which is smaller, would. Interestingly, the dies are rotated about 15% from the normal coin turn, which is kind of unusual. It's seen on a few of these, but it's not like it's going to make a difference value-wise. There's only one of these coins, and it sold for $57,500 in January 2010, which was the same auction as the 1993D Mule. After that, we go to one of the more interesting, this is one of my favorite mules, and that's the 2000 Sacagawea Washington quarter, and it is a Washington quarter that's been struck on a Sacagawea planchet. And this one was originally found in Arkansas by a man named Frank Wallace, and a lot of them have been kind of emerging in pocket change since. Most of them kind of were discovered by 2001, 2002, but every once in a while you hear of a new one. And there are 3 different die pairs known to exist, meaning that there's 3 different dies that were matched in the muling, and 16 or so have actually been confirmed as being out there and in existence. There's a collector named Tommy Bolak who's purchased about 11 or so of them in the 30 to 150,000 range. The 150,000 mark was for a MS-70 coin. The second to last coin that we'll be talking about is the Sacagawea wrong lettering, and this is one of the most interesting errors in my opinion. Not only was this coin a $17,000 sale for what's a relatively minor, in our opinion, example, the PCGS company, the grading company, ended up giving a $10,000 finder's fee to a man named Andrew Moores for allowing them to grade it. So it was a double whammy. And the 2000D Sacagawea coin did not have any edge lettering. It wasn't a coin that was even meant for edge lettering. But the coin, what must have happened is, since edge lettering goes on after the coin is the obverse and the reverse are struck, basically this coin would have had to maybe fall on the floor or in some way or shape not make it out with the rest of the Sacagaweas, and instead got thrown in with a presidential dollar. And I believe that it was found out of a roll, as was the next one, which is a 2009 Zachary Taylor presidential dollar. Now, this one has never been sold, so we don't know the values, but it's a really, really cool coin. Zachary Taylor, the coin was made in 2009, but somehow it has the dating from 2010 on the rim. So basically, again, since they make this, they strike the obverse and reverse sides of the coin first, and it must have fallen on the ground. It ended up being put in a roll of 2010D Native American $1 coins, purchased right from the mint. So probably a coin was left behind between the striking and the edge lettering, same as last time, and ended up just getting the edge lettering and then being put into a roll, as the planchets are the same. And last but not least are 2007-2008 metal token strike, and this is just a really cool, interesting error. Basically, the Mule has Abigail Adams obverse and Louisa Adams reverse, and they were making the First Spouse series, so they had the gold $10 designs, but they also made them in larger brass metals. But the coins ended up being struck together. It was the wrong Adams die pairs. So one of the interesting things is that the mint says that they never strike coins retroactively these days. So either it would have had to been that they were actually striking them retroactively, or that the coins were being made in 2008 a bit early. Now the back, as you can see right there, it's tough to make out, but it shows Louisa Adams with her young son on their way from St. Petersburg, Russia to Paris, France, and just is not anything to do with Abigail Adams. These sell for about $1,000, which is a really good price for a non-coin Mule, and there's 28 certified with PCGS and 21 with NGC. But just a final Mule coin that I hadn't heard about before this, and I just wanted to bring to your attention, and I think it's a really cool piece of American era numismatic history.
Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you want to get in touch with me, do so on my website, treasuretownYT.com, my Instagram, TreasureTownYT, or my Facebook, Treasure Town. I've got links in the description, and I'll see you on some of my other videos.